Welcome everybody to the latest episode of Mondays in MMORPGs. What?
That was a very shy singing.
I didn't sing this time. Welcome to
Hello
the
and
latest
welcome
episode.
everyone. Yeah,
This
we
week
need to find a team.
this week is going to be a far lesser. We're not going to talk about anything heavy this week. Last week's episode was, and last 2 weeks worth of episodes, we talked
hmm
about gaming addiction, and then we turned around and talked about. It's been really heavy the last couple weeks. So this week we're going to do a light episode. And this time, it's been corked since yesterday, so I'm hoping I can replicate.
Oh,
Very well done. All right, this is a Chianti, which I think I've had on the show before. It's Poggio Civetta. This is a 2016 from Italy. Uh, it's a very good wine. My wife does not like it very much, so this is my bottle. She had something, I was going to drink it on the show, but there was only one glass left. So just let her have it, and I'll buy another bottle of it. Um, next time. She's drinking a Shiraz that she found from, I think it's from Catalonia. But anyway, oh, and your sad little tea.
yeah.
Mm,
It's a green tea, flavored with different red fruit, I suppose. It's called Moulin Rouge. You
that
know,
doesn't
guys,
sound
what
so
it
bad.
means. I don't need to translate
Yeah.
that for you, right? But it doesn't taste very good to be frank.
I
It
bought.
has a little bit too much like a soap, or
Ugh.
I don't know. It's the first time I'm drinking it. I'm not really convinced. I prefer my ananas curcumin green tea.
There you go. I've been. Chris and I have been on a. The brand is called Stash. It's from the United States, but they have a white tea with mint, which I may have mentioned on the show. It's really good.
Yeah, white tea is good.
It's
It's
funny
the
because I can remember
most
like
expensive one.
2003, 2004 when I first started drinking their teas, they didn't have the combo. So what I would do is, unbeknownst to me that this would become a thing, I would literally buy their white tea and their mint tea, and I would just mix them and have a cup of white mint tea, back, 15 years ago or whatever. Now they actually sell a blend, which is really delicious, by the way. And then we've got another green tea mint blend that she's drinking. She drinks more tea than I do.
Do
Um,
you know what white tea is?
mm,
The white tea is the very young leaves of tea, and they are still covered with a duvet, which is why it's called white tea. But
mm,
it's the same tree than the green tea or the black tea.
but
The
it's just a
black
young
tea is
leaf.
is boiled. The green tea is what you have the harvest, the normal harvest, and the white tea is like the spring tea,
Hmm.
and it's why it's very expensive. It's very light in flavor, and it's very subtle
Hmm.
and very very
I
delicious.
did not know that. I'm not a big tea connoisseur, so I guess I just learned something new today. I
Yeah.
drink coffee. Like coffee and wine are my either those two. I drink a lot of water too, which is funny because Chris does not drink a lot of water. She drinks a lot of tea, which is essentially it's water. She drinks a lot of
Yeah.
herbal teas, which is funny to me because herbal teas, I always find it funny that people call them tea because they don't actually have tea leaves in them. It's
Yeah, yeah.
it's herbs and flowers. So it's not actually tea leaf, but people
It's
still call
because
them
it's an
teas.
infusion and it's
Sure.
prepared like tea, so I guess you mix up
She's got
both.
like
But
this
yeah.
one that's like seven flowers, and I don't
Hmm.
know, she's probably got 15, 20 different teas in the kitchen. So I tap into
Nice.
mine a couple times a week. Anyway, um, today's episode is it's something that it's a topic that I'm curious about because
Hmm.
actually it spawned because today when I turned on not when I turned on, excuse me, when I woke up this morning and logged into Facebook and was going through my feed first thing in the morning with my coffee, um, I just recently started playing Warframe on the PS4 as a research and development kind of thing. So I'm doing research on it and just a lot of people recommend it to me over the years. I wanted to see kind of up close and personal how they've done some things. I like to look at how different companies are operating. Anyway, I got on Facebook this morning, following their Facebook page, and they announced that they're getting ready to have um, their own convention coming up. And I remember a few months ago, Grinding Gear Games had, I want to say it was their first or second, um, like big event in New Zealand around Path of Exile. And this just got me thinking this morning, like, I'm a pretty hardcore, I'm a hardcore gamer, definitely. I've been gaming for 20 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
And MMORPGs are my life. I'm involved in building one now. Like they are a big part of my life, but I have never felt compelled to go to a game related like fanfare or festival. Now,
Probably because none of your game had
oh
organized one.
no, no, yeah, they have. EverQuest 1, EverQuest 2, like Sony used to have their big
Okay.
fanfare every year in Las Vegas. And I just never, and this is weird because I go to trade shows all the time. I'm a public speaker. I've done many, many trade shows over the years. So I understand the benefit of a trade show, but a trade show is a lot different because it's about all these different companies coming together in one event. A good example would be like E3 or PAX or the
Mm-hmm.
GDC or Gamescom. Like these are events where, 200, 300 companies come or more to represent their games and their things. Whereas a game conference is only about one specific game, or if that company has multiple games, it's about their selection of titles. I know Square Enix has their
FanFest, yeah.
FanFest thing. Is it called FanFest?
Yes, it's called FanFest, and I can
Sure.
speak longly about that
So this
to
is where
illustrate the
this
subject.
this might be an episode where you get to talk more than I do. So my question is, because I look at like CitizenCon, Star Citizen has started theirs. Shroud of the Avatar has had some of theirs. I know Richard Garrett for years with Ultima had many big get-togethers. Sony had their um, fanfares in Las Vegas. I see, Path of Exile doing them now. I see Warframe getting ready to put one on. So I have to ask, like, what? My question's slightly multifold. So first and foremost, I have to ask, what is the allure of going to a game specific show? Because as a customer of these games, love these games, play these games, I spend money on these games, more than happy to throw my money at these companies. But even as hardcore as I played EverQuest back in the day, I never felt compelled to spend an additional $2,000, $3,000 to go to Las Vegas, to get a hotel room for 3 days, to pay for flights, to pay for tickets, to dress up. However, I have dressed up for Star Wars, so I kind of do understand some of that fanfare stuff. So I mean, what is the reason that people go to these events, and what I think the better question that I'm looking to answer is what would convince people to want to do that? Because if we look at eventually putting on something for Saga of Lucimia, when do we know that it's a good time? How do we know that it's the time to do it?
Mhm.
And what draws people to these events? So I'll let you dive into things.
Yes. First of all, 2,000 or $3,000, euro, whatever, to go to such an event, I will not do that. That's way too expensive. Or I need to be very rich to do it. But no, the event I've been in taking part were more reasonable prices. That's
Okay.
the first thing.
Well, so
So
where am
the
I where am I going wrong? Like when you talk about it doesn't cost that much.
well, this may be because a question of distance. Maybe for you, an American citizen going to Las Vegas, it costs a lot of in-flight
Well, I mean,
hotel
I look at it and
and
I
the
go, it
thing.
might be like $500 for the tickets, $500 for the hotel room, $500 for my
Yeah, but
food, $500 for the event ticket. Suddenly I'm at $2,000,
for me, if I go to an
2,000.
event in
Yeah.
Europe, it will be less expensive than that. First of all, I will take a very cheap hotel. And generally, I take a dormitory in a room or something. This is the way I do. In the train, or I don't need to take a flight from Belgium to go in Germany
Yeah,
or
that's a good
or,
point.
or in
Europe
London.
has
So
trains. We do not have trains in the US. Not really anyway.
yeah,
Yeah.
so this changed a lot, but I will not use unless I can afford it. I still would like one day to go to BlizzCon, but it's too expensive for my wallet at this point. Otherwise, I will do it gladly. So the reason why, because it's like the summum. It's like materializing what you have been doing all the time. It's like transferring what you built in a virtual world in the real world. It's making the connection between your real life and your virtual life. It is meeting people in the flesh that you have been playing with. It's having fun with the game you enjoy, but in real. So you will be playing the game in a different environment. You can touch it. You can see the devs speaking on the stage. You can watch artwork hanging like an exhibition. You can play mini games. FanFest is really good, by the way. I don't know how the other fair are because my only experience is through FanFest. But you can play mini game like the one in Final Fantasy, but they are real, like fair games. You can take a snack with people and just walk around, see all the cool cosplay, and mostly meet your friends, meet the people with whom you're playing. So I have been twice to FanFest. The first time I played FanFest, I had started Final Fantasy seriously 3 months beforehand. So we cannot say I was a huge fan of the game. I enjoyed the game, but it was not specifically my favorite one, nor the one I had the most emotional bond. But I just wanted to do it and see some people that I knew and meet friends, etc. And the second time I played Final Fantasy, or I went to FanFest. I did play Final Fantasy for a longer time. I had streamed it, so I knew more of the community, and that was awesome to see all those person that I've seen on Twitch, I've talked to on social media or in game, I've done dungeon with. Now I had the chance to hang out with them, hug them, have a dinner at a restaurant with them, and that was the most interesting side. And I believe that's why people are doing it. But mostly it's this feeling of um, this link between your real life, your real world, with the everyday life and everything, which is a little bit, let's say, grayish. And you have your fantasy world where you play games and go in dungeon and kill dragon, and that you have the fest in the middle,
So it kind of
which make the
sounds,
bridge.
when I was living in Colorado, I remember this is when The Phantom Menace was getting ready to come out, and I was subscribed to Star Wars Insider, and etc. I was a big Star Wars fan, and when they announced that the first ever Star Wars celebration was going to be in Denver, Colorado, my buddy and I were like, "Well, it's right here! Like, holy crap, you know!" And we bought the 3-day weekend pass, which was I don't remember, $200, $300. Um, this was 2000, 1999 probably, probably 99 if I remember correctly, 98 or 99. Anyway, um, that's the closest thing I can say that I've ever gone to that would rival a game related show because
Mm-hmm.
it was all about Star Wars. And we went, and I guess thinking back, at the time, being 18, 19 years old, it was a really amazing. It was it was 99 because that's when I met the guys in line. I was in line to go buy Legos at the Star Wars store, and the guys in line behind me were the ones who introduced me to EverQuest. And EverQuest had been out for a few months by that point, so it was 99. Um, so I remember going, and it was this event where I spent a crap load of money. Like I spent like $700 in Legos.
Oh, wow.
I went crazy. I bought all four covered. There was four different covers for the Phantom Menace book by Terry Brooks. I bought all four of those with the jackets. Then I had him sign all four of those. So I got to meet Terry Brooks. I got to meet Warwick Davis. I got to meet Anthony Daniels. I got to meet Ray Park. I got to meet a lot of the actors who played the parts in the movie. There was a life-size X-wing there. There was a life-size pod racer. It was absolutely a cool event, and it was also a lot different from what I see on the live streams now because I haven't gone to one since that first one. And when I went to that first one, there were definitely, I can't tell you, I'd have to look it up online. Off the top of my head, I would say there was a few thousand people there. But now it's this massive, massive event where they have tens of thousands of people come,
Mm-hmm.
and it's this global phenomenon. And it's not just about going and talking about. So that first one was all about the Phantom Menace. So everything had to do with the new movie that was coming out. Now the Star Wars celebrations are about the entire franchise. So it's not just
Mm-hmm.
about the new movies that's coming out. It's about the new TV shows, the new animated shows, the new video games, the new comic books, the new novels, the new this, the new that, the new this, the new that, the new merchandise, blah 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 blah. So it's this massive marketing show that's still all about Star Wars. And I'm assuming like the Final Fantasy fanfares like that. I mean, from what I've seen from live streams and stuff, it's just all about Final Fantasy, right?
Yes, it's all about Final Fantasy, but I will not say it's a promotional show. I will say the way I've experienced FanFest, and I do not know about the other things where I've not been, but it really felt like a thank you from the developer Square Enix for their community. Because everything, of course, you pay your ticket, but everything on place is beautiful. You have beautiful decor. Yeah, they choose a nice venue. You have show all the time with the developer speaking. You have a live letter, which is the developer discussion about the next patch. You have some developers that are presenting themselves. Of course, you have the translator. You have two concerts with the music of the game. You have a classical concert with the piano and the singer, which is like opera singer. And the next day, it's like metal, metal concerts for because that's the music of Final Fantasy is very mixed up in style and genre. And then you have all those mini games which are like fair game, like throwing balls into that, but it's done like some sort of mini game that you have in the game itself. You have, of course, the cosplay contest. You do have an art fan contest, and you have also all those computer aligned where you can play different part of the game, but they are reorganized for this event specifically. They always make a boss fight specifically for the fan fest that you will only find during this fan fest. I don't think they implement it in game ever after that, and it's really feel like they're celebrating their community. They're celebrating the love of the game, and all along the time you will see Yoshi, which is there. Um, say thank you to the community, and they are bowing, they are Japanese, so they're bowing, they are nice, they are kind. It's really, really great. It's really heartwarming. And like I told you, when I went to FanFest, I was not really super involved into the game yet, but this really gives you a boost in the morale. You want to play it because you are there in the community. It's beautiful. It's very exciting.
So the next question I have, because I'm actually, as you've been talking, I've been looking at some information. Because something that I've always wondered is when I look at the companies that tend to put on these events, they're big, big, big companies, like
Mm-hmm.
companies with tens of millions of players and hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. Because in order to put on a fanfare, it costs a lot of money. Even though you are asking players to pay a ticket to come, that helps pay for the costs of the show because the company has to pay up front for everything, and then
Yeah.
they sell tickets to reimburse themselves for that. But it seems to me, I'm going to finish my train of thought before I get too
Mm-hmm.
far ahead of myself. It seems to me that only companies with lots and lots of money can do this, or with really, really big populations. Because I'm looking, and Path of Exile, their first ever convention, they called it ExileCon, happened last year. This was the one that was November 16th and 17th of 2019. Their game
Mm-hmm.
launched in 2013, and they ran their first ever conference in 2019, so 6 years after their launch. So I'm wondering, my assumption is that it costs so much money that a small company really can't afford to do it. But once you get to a certain point, you can. Because it looks to me like it took them 6 years. Because when they launched in 2013, that was when they had around 20 employees. And then they grew the game over 6 years to the point where they had 120 employees. Tencent came on, bought them for more than $100 million, and then suddenly they come out and they do this huge
Mm-hmm.
ExileCon. And everybody that I've talked to and all the reviews I've read have said that ExileCon was very well put together for a first time conference,
Mm-hmm.
and that it was a really cool thing, and it was obviously all about Path of Exile and what's coming down the pipeline. Because I look at where we're at as a company, and I just don't think that there's enough people to justify doing a conference. Because
No.
you can think if we've got 50 people who would show up, that's cool. But when you look at these conferences, you're typically you want to see 300 400 minimum people who are going to show up and justify the expense, because it costs a lot of money to rent out a a space like that, whether it's a conference
Yeah.
center or a hotel that has a conference hall inside or something like that. So it seems to me, because I've never seen a small game or a small company doing it. It's only ever been companies that have, like 100 million or, 150 million players or whatever. That's an exaggeration, but I mean, 10 million players seems to be like the minimum, I would think.
Well, it makes sense because would you know all the costs for organizing something like this? You only have the renting the place, then having all the computer, the decoration, the
Yeah, you have to
food,
pay
the
for all the art,
drinks,
all the
uh,
banners and
the
artwork and
staff,
yeah, catering.
everything. So if there's not enough people that are going to your conference, why will you use that much money? It's really a celebration of the community. I think FanFest is clearly that. It's also what they're saying themselves. It's really nice because it's a Japanese company and they do it in Japan, Europe, and United States in the same year. They do this FanFest only every 2 years, but they're doing it 3 different locations to
Oh,
really
so
celebrate
okay.
all of their community,
So they don't
which
do it.
Blizzard is not doing.
No. So they do it
And
every 2 years instead of every year, but because they're not doing it every year, they make the effort to do it on each continent. Well, not each continent,
yes,
but in each major hub. Europe,
yeah,
America, North
exactly.
America, and then Asia.
Which is
So
amazing. So
yeah,
you don't have to
because
travel to Japan to go there. You
that was the
just
thing.
can
I
go
was
with
actually surprised
BlizzCon.
for ExileCon, like how many people went and how big of a deal it was, because that was all the way over in New Zealand, which for
Mm-hmm.
everybody in the world, you have to
Yeah,
travel like 20 hours minimum to get to New Zealand.
yeah.
Like it is not easy to get to. Um, but since we just mentioned BlizzCon, that obviously that's like the gold standard
Biggest
of,
one.
yeah, and they
Yeah.
do, because it's not just about one game, it's about all
All
their
their
different
game.
their games, and it's also from again, I've never had a reason to go. I've never been into Blizzard that big into their games, because I've been busy with other things. But I've often watched, if not the live streams, I've watched the after videos,
Mm-hmm.
and seen things. And it's this massive thing where they have, huge bands that come play. It's a show. I mean, it's a
It's
place.
amazing. Yeah.
And I think with BlizzCon, that's also, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's also the place where they officially announce
Yeah.
all of their upcoming titles, correct? And
And
or their upcoming expansions.
that's what the FanFest is doing too. They are revealing their new expansion in 3 cinematics. So the first cinematic will be limited. Let's say Japan is the first one, so they will release part of the cinematic. Then next it's Europe. They will give the second part, and they will announce new
Ah,
stuff. And then the third one in United States, they will do the finale with the last part of the cinematic and the last information regarding the
that's really
expansion.
cool, actually.
Yeah. So you always have a reason to, oh yes, we will know some new information because now it's the fan fest in United States. Yes, let's
So now,
watch.
yeah, so now you have a reason to tune into each one of their fan fests, regardless if it's the European one or the Asian one or the North American one. That's
Yeah, but I
interesting.
don't know which crazy person will do the 3 of them. You're just
You'd
watching
really
from
have to
the
be a
computer,
hardcore fan.
probably. Yeah.
Didn't you go to ZeniMax's thing before E3 a few years back?
Yes, that was
What's it called?
Bethesda. It was just BE3,
BE3.
so it's Bethesda but it was not like FanFest, not exactly. Or it was a mini FanFest things. So mostly you had a conference with all of the different announcements, and then you had a sort of party with where you could have drink and food, and you had computers where you can try different games developed by Bethesda. But it was not really a convention like FanFest will be or like BlizzCon will
Well,
be.
because it was right.
The-
It's meant to coincide with E3, so they're already
yeah,
at
and
E3 showing things.
I think that now they're just doing E3 and they have their big stuff over there. So I'm not really sure how they're doing things anymore.
Okay.
But I know they participate in a lot of different events. It's always really nice what they're doing. When they announce the new expansion or the new chapter, There's media party for journalists and streamers and stuff like that, and it's just one day, but they have this announcement and conference and interviews and food, and it's a nice decor, and then you can of course have 1 hour playing the game, testing it, so you can
Most of
make.
these are 2 days, right? They're never three. It's mostly just 2 days.
Yeah, but that's not really a party. It's more like they invite the media, and instead of just having a boring conference, it's a really cool and fancy conference. I would say it's more like that. It's not really a convention.
Well, I'm thinking more like the fanfare for FanFest for Final Fantasy. Because I've looked at like ExileCon, BlizzCon, all these conferences. They seem to only ever be 2 days.
I think BlizzCon is 3 days.
Is
It's a
it?
whole weekend. Oh, it's so big. You have this opening ceremony and you have the ending ceremony, and in between you have all those presentation, panel, discussion, games, esports stuff, etc. BlizzCon, I really hope one day I will go. Hopefully, when people are less mad at Blizzard,
No,
because
they're 2 days.
it
I'm looking at their schedule right now.
it's just 2 days, but then you have
Yeah,
the opening ceremony, which is before. No, I have the
maybe.
feeling that it's a very long weekend, but it starts on the Friday. But might be time zone that's messed up my
And they've
mind.
actually
I'm
got
not sure.
stats here, which I think is very interesting. The first one was 2005. Tickets were $50. And there were 8,000 people that went. Um, and then the numbers just rose from there. And it looks like their biggest was 2018, 40,000 people, and
Oh,
tickets were $200 for physical tickets and $50 for virtual tickets. And then 2019, it doesn't have the numbers yet, but the tickets went up to 230 um, with virtual tickets for $50. Um, so, which is just crazy. 2019. Yeah, and then they're giving away goodie bags and all this other stuff. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like because even their first one for Blizzard was 8,000 people. I'm looking up real quick. Um,
and it was the year of the release of World of Warcraft.
I'm trying to figure. I want to know. I don't know if this information is available, but I'm curious how many people went to ExileCon in um, in New Zealand. I know that with Star Citizen, they're one of the few games that I can think of where it's an in development title that has been doing um, conferences. They've done their CitizenCon every year since I
Hmm.
think maybe the second or third year that they started doing. But they're also an exception in the sense that they're a crowd-funded game that has made so many hundreds of millions of dollars um, that they've been able to afford to do it.
Hmm.
And I don't know that that's something that everybody would be able to do. Um,
I believe that a smaller company or someone that cannot really justify the expense, their first step is to go to gaming conference such as Gamescom or E3 or stuff like that, and not only have a presence on the event itself, but then organize a meet and greet outside in a restaurant or in a bar or something. And I think that a lot of companies are doing that. I know ArenaNet is generally doing it for Guild Wars 2. The Elder Scrolls Online is doing that at Gamescom as well. They are having a gathering where they invite the devs, and you have you have a big party, so sort of in a restaurant, in a bar, something, and that's outside of the event itself. And some people are just going to that. They are not going to Gamescom, but they're just going to the meet and greet events of their community. So I will say that this is probably the first step to do.
sure. I'm looking at. I don't see any numbers, but Massively OP has a. They sent somebody to ExileCon and he took some pictures, and it looks like there was a 300 people in attendance, so
Mm-hmm.
decently sized. It's interesting though that their company lead also said they're not going to be doing it every year. It's going to be something that they only do for when they have something really big to announce or something. So that's interesting. I could see us moving towards that direction, like when we're doing something really, really big that we would want to promote at an event like that, like doing something. But I just
Mm-hmm.
don't see financially how it makes sense to do it every year unless you're one of those huge companies that has a
Like Blizzard.
yeah, that has $1 million or $2 million sitting around to put on something like that, because I don't think a lot of people realize how much it costs to put on an event like that. It's on the
Mm-hmm.
low end, having done some conferences before. If you're wanting to put something together for a few hundred people, you can be looking at $250,000, 250, $300,000 at the low end in terms of renting out the space, getting the insurance, getting the catering, getting all the swag bags made up, all your banners, everything else. It's not a cheap thing to do.
No.
So this
It's
comes back
for
to
me it's really look, but in the same times it's kind of also show off the grandeur of it's a little bit like in the past king were throwing
yeah.
super tournoi and things like that.
I think it'd be fun to do, but at the same time, I can't see it being justifiable in our budget for any time soon. I know when we've done, like when we did the Austin,
Dream.
yeah, yeah, obviously. And when we did the Austin Game Conference, we did what you had mentioned. Since we were already there, we just told everybody that we're going to be there, and we had some fans show up
Mm,
and vote for us during the show. Come up to us after the show. We went out, had some beers. They came and hung out with us at the Intel booth during the Austin Game Conference. I mean, that was it was interesting and fun, but it was also only people who lived in the local area who were driving down to the Austin Game Conference to come
mm-hmm.
hang out with us. Nobody actually had to spend more than gas money to get there. So, in my mind, asking people to spend at least $1,000 to $1,500 on the low end to come to a special event, I would need to make sure from a company perspective that we're giving them their money's worth. And that means being able to put on a show, and that's something that requires investment. So it's one of those things. I've just been thinking about it all day today. So when we got together and started talking about what did we want to cover in the show today, that's kind of just been on my mind all this morning. Um, if you had to, let's just play make believe here. If
Mm-hmm.
you had to plan a Saga of Lucimia fanfare,
Yeah.
what do you think would be things that you would want to see? Because obviously there's, let's talk about the next expansion that's coming out in 6 months. Let's talk about the new patch that's coming in 3 months.
Okay.
Here's a panel with the art team. Here's a panel with the programming team. Here's a panel with the creative director. Here's a panel with the musicians who are doing music on the show. Here's a panel with the class leads. Not that we have classes, but as an example. Or here's a crafting panel. It's all about the crafting. I understand, putting together panels is easy. Um, the hard part
It's
that I
it's
see
it's very
is
interesting.
what do you do for like swag and because there's okay, you could do a swag bag and
Well,
now you could do
Saga
like
of Lucimia is not the same
t-shirts.
than everything else. So we could do a sort of medieval fair, something a little
Ooh.
bit more immersive,
So,
and
so
with a medieval buffet.
this, by the way,
And
as you're on this note, I got to jump in because this is exactly what Richard Garriott used to do with his annual big get-togethers for like Ultima and everything. It was always caused like these big medieval events where everybody was supposed to come in costume. So I like where your mind is. Keep going.
okay, I will not force the costume to people, but maybe they will have an extra bag of swag if they come in a costume. Something to encourage people, but not for them, so they can still join even though they are not fully dressed. Um, what we will need is, yes, like I say, medieval food, medieval drink. Maybe we could have a sort of tourney. like a tournament or a tournoi
Mm,
or whatever you do for like a show. But in addition of the regular panel and introduction about the game, of course, you need to have cinematics on the giant screen, and then you have
that's
the
the tricky part.
computers
Yeah, tricky part is
to
cinematics
yeah, and
because
you
that's
have
expensive.
the computer. We are dreaming now, so
Yes,
we can
sure,
do whatever
sure.
we want, the biggest we want. So we could have it partially outside and partially inside. That would be great to have a sort of garden party in the same time that you have inside. It will have also to be on different continent of the players that play the game. So if there's players in United States and in Europe, we need both because I really find super sucky that Blizzard is always doing their convention in America and only in America, and all the European, if they want to go to that, they need to use a ton of money to get there.
Well, and it's also become very challenging with the current administration for people who need visas and etc.
Yeah, so I think that's important to stay fair, and welcoming and celebrates your community wherever they are in the world. Um,
I like the
and what
medieval
else?
idea. I like the idea of like
Yeah,
anybody who's staff, anybody from the team has to be dressed up in medieval outfits for sure.
yeah, and then we need medieval entertainment like fire
Fire breathers.
speeder and jungler and stuff like that, and games where people can participate like in a medieval fair. um
Well, and
like
on
the
the
thing where you're hitting on a to show your strength or your
sure,
ability.
and you give away prizes for all that stuff. Yeah, I mean that would be, I mean it would be relatively easy to hire an existing. Um, there are Renaissance festivals, and the people who they do that full time. They do Renaissance
Hmm.
reenactments. They're jugglers and etc. So you could contract those people to put on shows and have that kind of entertainment. Then you could have your festivals. You could have ooh, that'd be fun, like actual sword duels. But not with real
Yeah,
swords, not with real swords, but
yeah,
mock
we can
duels with
organize.
swords.
Yeah, we can organize something like this,
Our
which
version
which
of
will stay.
PvP.
Yeah, which will be in the mindset of the game, which is going back to the roots, which is more immersive. So we need this to illustrate as well. In the same times, Blizzard is all fabulous Las Vegas type of show, and it makes sense for the type of game they're selling and their type of status. Let's say FanFest is very cute and Japanese and polite and kind, and it's very much in the spirit of their game. So if we do something like that, you need to really represent what Saga of Lucimia is about. And yeah, we
I
could
also
have
see I also see that as a place being where we could announce like new books that are coming out, the new
yeah.
tabletop when the new
You,
tabletop
you
game
could
is
have
coming out.
at a teller, a tale teller, a corner where someone is saying
Oh, you mean like a
stories.
town crier? Okay, I get what you mean.
Not like a town crier, like
Oh
someone
no?
which is telling a storyteller.
Okay.
The one which is telling story. Before in the Middle Age, you had a lot of that, and it
Sure.
lasted longer. Even in Brittany, when I was kids, sometimes I went to see storyteller, and it was always really great because they were telling story
Well, essentially they're an
in a
old
very interesting way.
the modern version of the bard. So yeah,
Yeah,
because they could literally take aspects of the books and present them in a storytelling format. That could be
yeah.
fun.
Or you can
Um,
even have a story that has never been announced ever, and
well,
that will be all new, like a little side story of the
I like all of these ideas.
universe.
The question at this point would be where would we do it? And of course, time of the year. That's something I've never,
Need to
because
be the summer
yeah, they
or
typically do them in the
spring or
summertime.
something.
Um, well, not always. Like
No,
Excel.
Blizzard is in autumn. FanFest is in the winter, or it has been in the winter. So, but yeah, if we want to do it outside with a tornado, it need to be good weather.
It needs to be odd. I wouldn't want to do it in summertime unless we're somewhere where it's not horribly blistering hot in the summertime. Um,
Yeah, it might be the spring, or but when the or September, but when the weather is kind of
So this is the
nice.
interesting thing on a side note because we're not, we are not, our company does not have a physical headquarters. So our legal headquarters where we founded the company is Austin, Texas, but none of us have any actual ties to Austin, Texas. We went there for business reasons, for tax purposes, because they were offering some tax benefits to game studios who were forming there at the time. But we don't actually have a physical location yet, and I know that John and I have spent probably the last 2 years, maybe longer than that. We've researched different places where we would theoretically put a studio if we ever get big enough that we need a physical location, because we can do what we're doing right now with a remote studio. And recently we've swung back around to some parts of Minnesota because of investment money that could potentially come through. And if that were to be the case, I was just thinking ahead, like that's a place where the weather's actually really nice in the summertime. Like it doesn't get that hot in Minnesota in the summertime. However, the winters are like the some of the worst in the country in
But who
Minnesota.
cares? We're gamers, so we have a good
Yeah, you
reason to
just
bury ourselves inside
make
and
sure
we'll
there's a
never go
make sure
out.
there's a generator for if the power goes out, and just hunker down when it snows and build games and play games.
Yeah.
Because this also ties into, I've talked about, and because you've heard me talk about this before, and we've talked about it on the forums and everything. And I've already done, I don't know how many I've done, but we were starting to put together the beginnings of the Saga of Lucimia cookbook because I really liked what I saw when
Hmm.
ESO did the cookbook and Blizzard did the cookbook for World of Warcraft.
Hmm.
Game of Thrones did a cookbook. Actually, the girl who did the cookbooks for Game of Thrones, Elder Scrolls Online, and World of Warcraft,
Yeah.
she's amazing. I don't know her name off the top of my head, but she's the one who does all their official cookbooks. She creates the recipes, she takes the pictures, puts it all together. She's an extremely talented person, which inspired me because I've done food photography for a decade with my wife, all around the world. And so we started to put together all these recipes for it. But then as we got deeper into the project, I sat down and talked to my brother, and then I talked to John, and it was like, you know what? What we really should do, because there's this guy, I'm going to go see if I can pull it up real quick. He does a show. Townsend's is the name of his show, and he does 18th century colonial cooking on his YouTube
Hmm.
channel for like the colonial era of the United States, and it's all in costume. And I was like, and he's always using it's all in costume, and he uses recipes and ingredients from the times. And I went, well, that's amazing, first and foremost. Second of all, I was like, you know what would be even better than doing a Saga Lucima cookbook is to get the cookbook all ready to go, and then take like 20 of the recipes and schedule like a 2 week shoot where we all go to a location and we all every day we're in costume and we're doing these little sketches about making these recipes from the cookbook, but we're all in costume and in character. So if the recipe is like Dragon Balls, I don't know, I'm just making something up right now. Like you can role
Dragon
play.
Balls.
I'm just giving dragon
What's
testicles.
Dragon Ball? Yeah!
Something, it's whatever, it could be squirrel
Not that
toenails or
name.
something. But you could have these ingredients that are normal ingredients, but you can role play them as something else and have these little comedic sketches where
Hmm.
you have these little 5 to 10 minute long videos that you could put
Yeah.
together. But it's a lot of work. Um,
Yeah.
having done videography for 10 years as well, um, it's a lot of work putting together that kind of stuff because you'll shoot for 2 weeks and you're shooting for 8 to 10 hours a day minimum. It's like movie production. So you shoot
It
for
doesn't
two
matter.
weeks and then you produce for 8 months. And then after a year of work, you have the finished product. So that's something else that ties into the medieval theme of a if we were to do some sort of a fair, or
Yeah.
festival, would be to tie that into like the release of the cookbook or something, because that's supposed to be all medieval themed
You
anyway.
know what? It could be even better. It's like you're mixed up LARP and things. You also can have a little quest to do.
Sure. I'm a big fan of some people might know who this is. Europeans, not as much as North Americans, but the Society for Creative Anachronism, who I have mentioned periodically. It's a reenactment group, which is not the same thing as LARPing, but I have a huge respect for them. I've been a part of their society multiple times over the years, mostly when I was
Mm.
in my late teens into my early 20s. That's where I learned fencing, I learned leather crafting, I learned how to sew, um, learned quite a few things, archery, um, and that's another thing that I've always appreciated is like they have these big get-togethers and it's like role playing, but it's not as hardcore as LARPing because everybody is they have various versions of costumes
Hmm.
and they're not necessarily like you're in character during the events, but then you go back to your caravan or your tent and you know it's you time. Whereas LARPing is more
It's all
fantasy.
the time.
Yeah, well, and LARPing is fantasy based, whereas the Society for Creative Anachronism is historical based. So
Yeah.
it's a little different. It's medieval reenactment as opposed to fantasy reenactment. But I
But I've
do
met
appreciate that.
someone that does LARP in historical. In when you do historical, you need to be super picky in your costume
Yes.
because it needs to really represent the
Yes.
reality of it and not just
Didn't
made up your own mind.
didn't you go to something last year?
Yes, it was the LARP. That's where I met my boyfriend.
How fun? How did you like? How did you like that?
That was
It
cool.
was your
I
first time,
mean,
right?
uh, what you're talking about. Kidding. Yeah. Yes, it was my first LARP.
um, I mean, because I have not been in a very long time. It's been, God, since probably 2003, 2004. Because I used to do a little bit of LARPing back then as well. How long did you guys go for? Because I know when we used to go, we'd go for three,
It's
four
4 days.
days. Yeah,
It's
4 days.
from the beginning up to the end, and it was lasting 4 days.
How many people did
And
went? Like 20, 30 people?
20, 30 people?
Yeah, I don't
No.
know how many people
Oh,
went to the one you're doing.
no. It's probably, I don't know exactly, but at least 1,000.
Oh, wow, you went to a big LARP event. All my LARP
Yeah.
events were small, like 20, 30 people.
Oh,
It
no,
was
no,
just
no.
like
This
friends that we
is
all got together and
no, because each caravan, you need to be part of a caravan to be part of it. Each caravan needs at least 20 people to get there, and you have like, I don't know, probably 30 different caravans, and so
is there
everyone
like a
have their own.
link to their website or something that I can look at? Because I really want to dig into this. This sounds very interesting
Yes,
to
but
me.
it's
Send it to me.
mostly in French.
I can figure it out. Send it to me later.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
will do
Google
that.
Translate is for. It's not perfect, but it'll help me get in the right direction. I
All
would
right.
say that's so. The question I would ask the people who are watching this is, you know, are you the type of person who goes to conferences and conventions, not trade shows, but game-specific fanfares like
Mhm.
BlizzCon, Sony's fanfare, Final Fantasy's fanfare, ExileCon, CitizenCon, so on and so forth? Have you ever gone in the past? Would you go again in the future? What are some of the things that you like to see? And I'm also really interested in like what would inspire you to want to go to something if we were to put something together. I don't think we would put together anything in the near future, but I would obviously love to do something long term,
Of
It would be
course,
really cool to say
it will come.
if we got enough interest and have like a launch party. I think it would be really cool to have a launch party, spring
Yes.
spring of 2022, like games out and let's have a big get together and celebrate. I think that could be fun to do that. But the question is, are there enough people that want to do it, and what would we do? I think you and I have come up with some good ideas, but I definitely would love to hear from the community about some of the stuff that they'd like to see above and
Yeah.
beyond. Obviously, because it's easy to do panels and it's easy to do like previews of gameplay and what's coming down the pipeline for the game and stuff. Cinematics, I don't think we're going to be able to do because I don't at this point in time we don't have the budget to pay an animation company to do
Oh,
that kind of
yeah.
stuff.
This is because you are not doing cinematic, but we
Those are little
it's
things.
when you dream of something, you need to open the windows and dream fully and really feel it and experience it, and then it can come in your way.
Hint, hint, pre-order the game and get all your friends to pre-order the game because that way we can afford an animation team.
Yes, do it. Speak about this to your
Oh,
friends.
by the way,
Share
yeah. So
and like
as we
and
wrap up the
comment.
show, Don't forget, March 18th, 2020, the pre-order store is reopening for the Saga of Lucimia, and we will be doing a live stream that evening over on the Twitch channel for Saga of Lucimia. It's twitch.tv/Saga of Lucimia. So don't forget to mark the date, mark the time. Elo and I will be over there running a live stream. John may be with us that night, probably. March 18th, 8 p.m. Central Time.
Yes. See
So
you then.
don't
Take
forget,
care of
and
yourself.
please let us know what you think about conferences, conventions, and trade shows,
Mhm.
etc. Let us know in the comments, subscribe, etc. Thanks for your support, and we will see you
Bye bye,
next week.
guys. Take care. See you.